Donald Trump's dark past is surfacing and he is scrambling. He's got MAGA Republican Congress member proxies going out right now and saying the Epstein files were hacked. That's why there's so many millions of missing files. There was a mysterious hack, and so we're never going to get to the bottom of it. Meanwhile, you have Donald Trump's criminal cartel, his racketeering enterprise, aka the Department of Justice, attacking MeidasTouch network host Katie Fang's effort to get the Epstein files in federal court in Washington, D.C., and they are calling Katie Fang's lawsuit hyperbolic. And they're saying that Katie Fang does not know what she's talking about when she says that there are millions of missing documents. But Todd Blanche, they say in their filing, calmly and confidently is letting the court know that there simply aren't these documents out there and that the Trump regime has complied with the law. Also, don't miss this connection right here. Now we learn that Kash Patel, Donald Trump's FBI director, who in my opinion is clearly complicit in covering up the Epstein files, he's now taking a mysterious trip to Russia before the midterm elections. With everything that's going on now, that's where he's going to, Russia. And of course, we know in the Epstein files just how many times Putin is mentioned, just how many times Epstein's connections with, Russia is mentioned. And then I want to layer on top of this the fact that Donald Trump's catastrophic and unlawful war, which has now led to at least 100 service members being injured in the past 10 days alone, and I believe the number's actually multiples of that, and at least 4 service members who have been killed in the past 10 days, and I believe the number is much higher than that. This catastrophic war was always a distraction from the Epstein files. So the on again, off again, memorandum of understanding, ceasefire this, that, it's all Donald Trump warmongering to manipulate the markets, which he's doing, and trying to enrich himself and his right-wing oligarchs, and cover up the Epstein files while he and his friends are causing the deaths of our troops and the destruction of our economy. Let's dig in, folks. So let me show you what some of these MAGA Republican Congress members are out there saying now. Have you heard this one before? That apparently, the Epstein files were destroyed. This is a new one. And so Anna Paulina Luna, I just find it interesting, given that she was the MAGA Republican Congresswoman who arranged for the Russian delegation to show up on Capitol Hill a few months ago. You remember that? Remember when the Russians showed up and they were given a tour of the Capitol and Anna Paulina bragged that the Russians were all there? I mean, people who were on the sanctions list. Get to all of this in a moment with Kash Patel. So she's out there. There are other MAGA Republican Congress member out there saying, shucks, the Epstein files hacked, destroyed. That's why there are so many documents missing. What are you talking about? We know also that there are millions of documents that have not been produced because the despicable and disgusting Trump regime, which is covering up this child sex trafficking ring, claims that these millions of documents are privileged. Executive privilege, attorney-client privilege, privacy concerns. They're just making stuff up, not deliberative process privilege. Foreign languages. We can't translate foreign languages. Why not? Why not? We're not going to produce the privilege log either. Trust me, bro. Here's what Anna Paulina has to say. Play this clip.
I was also literally the only member of Congress leading the charge on declassification of the Jeffrey Epstein files in January of last year. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately what I saw, and this could probably be an entire new segment between you and I on like what actually transpired, but you know, we uncovered destruction of evidence under the former deputy director of the FBI. I had documented that, no one paid attention. I was pressing Attorney General Pam Bondi for the release of the Epstein files, publicly calling for its release. And then at a certain point, it then became political. And then, we have been conducting the investigations and oversight, but the fact is what the American people are not hearing is that we are never going to have the full files, because there was actively a cyber attack that occurred when Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were under investigation in New York. And people seem to forget that happened. So I actually don't think that we have the full deck of cards here specifically pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein. And I was actually in the room with members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, the Speaker of the House, and then some of the victims and the victims' attorneys, when, you had members of Congress asking, okay, well, can you name names, or specifically if the president was involved, of which the president was exonerated. And at that point in time, they also notified us that there was a pending lawsuit with Deutsche Bank.
And then last night, Donald Trump's criminal cartel racketeering enterprise, aka the Department of Justice, as Scott McFarlane from the MeidasTouch Network explains, he's the head of our Washington, D.C. bureau. Quite an excerpt in the new court response from Todd Blanche and the Justice Department to Katie Fang's lawsuit seeking the further release of the Epstein files. Well, it's hastily written, more typos by the Justice Department. The Trump administration lawyers call Todd Blanche rational, of sound mind. And then they call the MeidasTouch host Katie Fang hyperbolic. Hyperbolic? You know what? The outrage that y'all are covering up child sex trafficking rings and have the audacity to say hyperbolic? I want to bring up another point as well. You know by now the Epstein survivors met with Todd Blanche because Tom Tillis, the Republican Congress member from North Carolina, said he would not approve Todd Blanche as the Attorney General unless Blanche met with the Epstein survivors. Well, Todd Blanche met with the Epstein survivors and basically traumatized them. He was an absolute jerk. He was rude. He was abrasive. He was spiteful. He was nasty. And the survivors said that it was one of the worst meetings. It was worse than they ever could have expected in their worst nightmare, the way Todd Blanche treated him. And then originally, Tom Tillis, this Republican senator from North Carolina, said, "Way to go, Todd. Good meeting with the survivors, Todd. You did it, Todd." And then the survivors said, "Tillis, we want to meet with you because you told Blanche to meet with us, and he gave you and us the middle fingers, and now you, Tom Tillis, are responsible for re-traumatizing us as well. We hold you responsible, Tillis, because this was your idea, and rather than Blanche meet in good faith, he re-traumatized the survivors." Now, this is a real filing by the Justice Department last night. Defendant Todd Blanche, in his official capacity as Acting Attorney General of the United States, through counsel, respectfully submits this reply in accordance with the minute order dated July 6th, whereas the defendant's response, Blanche, to the order to show cause sets forth rational end arguments in response to the court's order. The plaintiff's response is filled with hyperbolic rhetoric, seeking to impose punitive sanctions on the department for availing itself of the process the court afforded it. No, Judge Sullivan, the federal judge, ordered you despicable DOJ to produce the Epstein files, to produce the privilege log. Katie Fang won the injunction. It wasn't gentle ask. It was an order. Do it. But just look at the whininess from the DOJ. Here's their file. Just like the incoherence. That goes, whereas the defendant's response to order to show cause sets forth rational end arguments in response to the court's order, the plaintiff's response is filled with hyperbolic rhetoric, seeking to impose punitive sanctions on the department for availing itself of the process the court afforded it. Oh, pity you, punitive sanctions of having to turn over the files that you're legally obligated to. Whining while the survivors are suffering. You want to talk about punitive sanctions? When you release the name of the survivors, You exposed them. You exposed photos of them and stuff that should never have been out there while you covered up for Epstein's co-conspirators and still do to this day. But the punitive sanctions for the DOJ. Oh my gosh. And then they go on to say over here, the court never ordered us to produce the documents, but rather it just ordered us to show cause. And we declined to do so. The plaintiff's papers make several outlandish claims and ignore most of the arguments offered by the department. For instance, plaintiff says that the department makes clear that whatever the federal statute requires it to do, it must comply. This is demonstrably false. The department is committed to transparency and complying with its statutory obligations. In its briefing, however, the department has attempted to highlight for the court the differing demands of several applicable statutes. The differing demands of several applicable statutes. So we're not turning over the Epstein files. It says the department needs to be afforded the ability to seek appellate review of the preliminary injunction orders that it believes are in error. We need time, Judge, so we can go to the DC Circuit and our friends at the Supreme Court. Now, Kash Patel's piece of it. Remember, Anna Paulina Luna invited the Russians to Washington, D.C., gave them a tour, rolled out the red carpet. Now, FBI director, same day as Anna Paulina says that, planning to go to Moscow and St. Petersburg in October. Because I know everybody was saying right now, as people can't afford anything, as you're struggling, you know what I really need right now? I really need our FBI director to go hang out with the Russians in Moscow or St. Petersburg. That's really what I miss. FBI Director Kash Patel is planning to visit Russia later this year, likely in mid-October. According to a U.S. official and a person familiar with the situation, it would be an unusual and sensitive trip for an FBI chief to one of America's top adversaries. The plans come as Washington and Moscow continue to be at odds over the war in Ukraine, with U.S. lawmakers demanding the imposition of heavy new sanctions. According to the U.S. official familiar with the travel plans, Patel is scheduled to visit Russia October 14th to 15th, first stopping in Moscow and then St. Petersburg. His host is likely to be the FSB, the Russian Security Services, the heir to the Soviet-era KGB, the official said. The person familiar with the situation confirmed that Patel is planning to visit Russia in the fall, including stops in Moscow and St. Petersburg. But people were granted anonymity to discuss the travel plans. And so nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here, folks, at all. And remember at the end of last week what Caroline Levitt had to say? Epstein files, a classic Washington hoax. A classic Washington hoax, she says. Here, play this clip.
But if you look at how this Epstein story sort of evolved over the past week, it's classic Washington hoax.
Yes.
You have Democrats on the Oversight Committee leaking redacted information to their favorite reporter at CNN, who then pops the story with that redacted information and does not reveal that the unredacted version is available. And the unredacted version proves that the so-called victim in this email is a woman who is unfortunately deceased, but prior to her death said on numerous occasions that President Trump never did anything wrong and was always incredibly friendly in her interactions with him. And so it's a purposeful leak to try to manufacture this news cycle to drag the president. And we've seen this play out so many times. It is a classic playbook of the Democrats using their friends in the fake news to spin up a narrative about the president. And so we just don't tolerate it. We don't give in. We just call it out for what it is. And we move on and we focus on the issues that we know the president was elected on. And I would just add one more thing on Epstein. I mean, the Department of Justice has turned over tens of thousands of pages to the House Oversight Committee and to the American people. I mean, they released everything that's legally releasable online or to the House Oversight Committee. They also tried to move grand juries to unseal documents in various states. And unfortunately, those judges declined. And they've been fully cooperating with the House Oversight Committee. So this idea that there's files that the DOJ is hiding or that this administration is not being transparent is just totally false. It's a fallacy. And I understand people have questions, and when you're on the outside, you're skeptical of government, and people should be. But there is literally nothing to hide. And President Trump has maintained that this entire time. And so, again, this is a classic playbook being run by the Democrats.
Fascinating, because Donald Trump's vice president, J.D. Vance, said, if you want to criticize us about our handling of the Epstein files, guilty. We're guilty. Here, play this clip.
Right.
It was Donald Trump.
He also kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago in 2005.
Kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. It's just, again,
well, it's obvious that Epstein was a sick man.
Yes, but if people want to say we mishandled the Epstein release, guilty. We did mishandle, especially the communications of it.
What do you think should have been done?
I think that we should have just dropped everything at the very beginning.
And then not to mention that when Donald Trump was giving that bizarre press conference at the end of last week where he talked about, he blamed China for interfering with the 2020 election, but no sanctions for China. And then when you actually read the documents that Trump declassified, they say, redaction, we judge that China will redaction and evaluate the implications of various electoral outcomes and interests. This is in 2020. If Beijing were to assess that the increasingly downward trajectory in U.S.-China relations threatened China's rise and could not be dealt with using existing tools, it might attempt to more directly thwart president's re-election, including by leaking information, redacted, or through online redacted influencer networks. Redacted. What would you be leaking? What would you be leaking? You all know from my previous reporting as well that the New Mexico State Attorney General, not the feds, the state of New Mexico, they are about to file a lawsuit against Trump's DOJ that has refused to turn over Epstein documents, any of them really, regarding the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, despite the New Mexico AG asking dozens of times, the Trump DOJ refusing to help and then trying to drag this on for the last several months. And when Donald Trump was asked, okay, Donald, so what are the consequences for China meddling with the election, as you claim, in 2020? What are the consequences? Here's what Donald Trump says. Let's play it.
What are the consequences for China for meddling in U.S. elections after your...
Well, we're going to see. We'll be speaking to them. We'll be seeing.
And sir, can I ask...
I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that China has redacted to leak about Trump, including through an influencer network about redacted. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. WTF. Hit the QR code or scan the QR code and pre-order WTF America. This is the book I did with my brothers. It comes out in October. I dedicate it to you, the Midas Mighty. Pre-order it now if you can. It helps to do pre-orders rather than wait till October. So if you can, pre-order WTF America now. Thanks so much. We appreciate you. And hit subscribe to this channel.
Before you go, our book, WTF America, is available for pre-order now. It's the story of how we got here and how we fight our way back. To pre-order, scan the QR code or click the link in the description. Let's do this.